everybody, and welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
And I am G.
Everybody get that straight. D and G. It should be the DG Report. No, never mind. All right. We won't go into the origins of that. We'll do a whole show about that sometime. But great to see everybody. It's been a busy time since we've been together last. We've got a couple of really great topics tonight. And G-Man, you feeling good?
Yeah, feeling great. Had a great day. Beautiful day here in Colorado.
Awesome. It's getting hot here in Oklahoma already. So it's not boding well for the summertime.
Right. Well, you can keep that.
Since there's no global warming, we don't have to worry about it, right?
Right.
That's what our senators tell us anyway in Oklahoma. Jim Snowball and Hoff.
I don't get that because the last 30 years have been the hottest ever. So how can you say
but there's been snow in April. So
yeah, it's because the climate change, because the global warming has moved the jet stream.
Can I quote Ronald Reagan?
Sure.
There you go again.
Right.
Using logic.
That was a pretty good Reagan, but I had to explain it to my sister who lives in Deep East Texas. They got 8 inches of snow where they never had snow before. You know, she wants to move where the seasons are going to change. I'm like, just stay right there.
Yeah. The thing is, it's like, and I think that's where the right wing is definitely a lot better than the left wing when it comes to talking points and hammering a talking point home. And I think that's where a clear example where the term global warming, even though it's scientifically correct, it doesn't sell well.
Yeah. It's like defund the police. And what you wanted to say was reform how police do their jobs.
Yeah, or refund the police. Take some of the money that they're getting and use it in different ways. Use it to have social workers available to help the police.
Right.
And there's domestic calls and things like that. But you turn it around on the other side. You think about something like the wealth tax that the Republicans call the death tax.
Yeah.
Right. And you got all these people that have $1,000 to their name if they're lucky that say, I don't want my kids to not inherit my money. And they don't realize that those inheritance taxes don't kick in until it's like $500,000 or more.
Yeah, I think it's $750 now.
Yeah. And so it's like, but they're great at messaging and they're great at simplifying the message. So it should be a good lesson for the Democrats to learn. So speaking of messaging and in the future, our first topic, if we really want to call it, when we talked in the pregame tailgate about what we wanted to talk about, I call this just the future of democracy.
Yeah.
We've got now the Arizona sham recount is going on, and recount is a loose term when you've got them examining the paper for traces of bamboo dust because they believe that false ballots were shipped in from China.
Right.
Now that's being carried over, and now the state of Georgia there's a court that has demanded that I think it's Fulton County, maybe another couple counties around Atlanta turn their ballots over to the Republicans to have another, even though they've had I think 3 or 4 audits already.
Right.
I don't know what irregularities. You've got that. You've got the state of Michigan, the state of Wisconsin, the state of New Hampshire, all considering these. And you've got a former twice impeached president sitting in, I think he's actually in New Jersey now at his club, but he was at Mar-a-Lago, sitting around and openly musing to people that he will be reinstalled as president in August. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read, Lindell is driving that train. And I just read in a report where now he's kind of backtracking and he's going, well, it may not be August per se, but right around that time. So basically he hinged it all on the Supreme Court. Well, they don't come back into session until October, right? And that when the Supreme Court. So
I think he's anticipating that he's telling people that there's going to be such a compelling case of all this evidence that nobody's ever seen, right?
Right.
That that the Supreme Court's going to issue an emergency injunction and reinstate, which I searched the Constitution this afternoon and I didn't see any clauses in there about reinstating
Yeah, there's
the
not.
president. And
There's not. I mean, I guess you could sue. I mean, let's be clear. In the 270 odd years the Republic has been in existence, there have been elections stolen. I mean, you go all the way back to 1800, Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and John Adams. John Adams was convinced that, that there was conspiracy to get him out of office. And that's why the Electoral College deadlocked. We know for sure that John Kennedy stole the 1960 election from Richard Nixon.
well, I'll push on that one. We know for sure they stole votes in Chicago, but we also know that Nixon stole votes in other places. So
right.
the
Well, we
question
know
is,
that
who stole the most?
right. We know that Johnson stole his Senate seat from Coke Stevenson, that then allowed him to push on and become the VP and then the president. So I mean, there have been elections that have been stolen in U.S. history.
Don't forget about 2000 with stopping
George
the vote.
W. and Al Gore. Yeah,
Which is pretty ironic when you think about the fact that Republicans in 2000 sued to stop the vote count,
right.
and in this past election they were suing to keep the vote count open in perpetuity.
Right. Yeah, and so, but you're right. I think these are precarious times for the Republic. I mean, you look at all the crazy laws that people are passing. Texas passed a 6-week abortion law. I mean, most of the time you don't even know you're pregnant at 6 weeks, much less, wanting to decide whether you have an abortion or not.
There's no exception in that for cases of rape or incest either.
No, nothing. Yeah, it's just crazy.
There's also, I believe, Oklahoma passed. We had an absolutely insane legislative session that just ended, but we passed a law, and there are several states that did this, that said if the Supreme Court rules and overturns Roe v. Wade, that abortion will be illegal, period.
Yeah, Texas did that too.
In the state of Oklahoma. So there'll be no abortion allowed. We also named a section of state highway after Donald Trump.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes really great with our shitty road conditions here. So I can't think of anything more apropos than naming a stretch of our state highway system after him. Right. We also have we passed the bill allowing people to escape prosecution if they hit a protester with their car, if they feel that their safety is endangered.
That's crazy. That's got to get overturned, don't you think?
We'll see. We got it. We have a biased judiciary. You think about all those federal benches that Mitch McConnell slammed through, and all those judicial appointments that he blocked for Obama to put in, and then allowed Trump to put lifetime appointments on the federal judiciary, let alone the three unprecedented Supreme Court justices that a one-term, twice impeached president was allowed to appoint.
Yeah.
So, you start, and then we're just talking about basic issue laws, not election laws. When you start digging into the election laws that are being passed, where they're outlawing Sunday voting, they're outlawing things like drive-through voting they did in Harris County and Houston. They're taking away early voting days. They're cutting back on early voting hours, all designed to penalize people who work for a living, people who have transportation issues, people who are poorer, and in most cases, people who are Black or brown.
Right.
So it's all geared towards suppressing the vote. And then if the vote still doesn't turn out the way they want, they've taken away, in most of these Republican controlled states, they've taken away control of the elections from the secretaries of state and given that oversight to the legislatures, which means that the legislature could come in counties like Harris County and Houston, or Bexar County and San Antonio, or Tarrant County, or Go to
Yeah.
Georgia, Fulton County, or any of those, Maricopa County in Arizona, and the legislature could just come in and say, we're going to stop the vote here because we feel like it's fraudulent.
Right.
And by all accounts, basically legislatively overturn a fair and free election.
Yep. And then
And
we're just a third world country. We have no
Yeah.
right to criticize anybody else. So, the thing that's gotten me is I've seen Trump supporters basically not only supporting but calling for a Myanmar style coup where the military steps in and just takes control of the government. And they're perfectly fine with that.
Former national security advisor, former director of intelligence agency, former lieutenant general in the Army, Michael Flynn was one of them who agreed with it.
Now, he said his comments were taken out of context. He said that what he said was that should never happen here. Although when you listen to the tape, the word never appears.
He said there's no reason that can't happen here.
Right.
And he's trying to say the inflection was wrong, that he was saying there's no reason, period. That can't happen here. But you listen to it and the way the crowd applauded, and the way that crowd applauded that, he knew what they were applauding. And if he didn't agree with them, that's where you pull a John McCain and you say, no, you're misunderstanding.
Right.
I'm saying that this couldn't happen.
I don't know who had the idea, but I think they ought to, somebody said this before, I think they ought to recall him to the military and court-martial him and send him to prison.
For sedition, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, it's
I mean, my wife and I disagree about this all the time. So, we had this conversation about what would you do if you were driving through a grocery store parking lot and you saw a guy shooting a gun? And she goes, I'd turn around and go the other way. And I said, well, I'd drive straight toward the guy and try to run over him with my car. It's just who I am. And at some point, you have to stand up to these things, or people just get away with whatever they want to. So I applaud that valedictorian from Lake Highlands High School who ditched her approved speech, valedictorian graduation speech, and basically implored her classmates to oppose the new abortion law in Texas.
Yeah. That was very gutsy.
Yeah, very gutsy. And I applaud the superintendent who was there, who didn't cut her microphone. So, I think, on the one hand, it looks like democracy is under siege. On the other hand, you look at polls like, Trump has a 36-point approval rating across the country. So, most people think that if he decides he wants to run, he'll get the nomination, but there's no way he'll win the race. People are just over him already. And I've read some indication that he doesn't want to run because he doesn't want to be branded. All the things that Trump talks about, the one thing he hates the most is the L word, being a loser. And I think that might keep him out of the race. I think at the end of the day, he's going to endorse somebody. I don't think it'll be Mike Pence. I think it'll be Josh Hawley or Ron DeSantis. If DeSantis doesn't get caught up in the probe of our good buddy Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, well, I applaud your optimism about democracy. I think the sad part to me is the fact that while Trump has such low approval ratings and Republicans have no policies that they're running on right now, basically their campaign is basically voter suppression. Right. Let's cut down the number of people voting. And unfortunately, I don't think the Democrats or the other side or independents are taking it serious enough. And I think everybody kind of has a laissez-faire attitude, like, oh, that can't happen here. But the danger we're having, we see it with the filibuster already, is that we're experiencing minority rule. And so I'm not talking about race when I say that. I'm talking about minority numbers are ruling the majority, because Mitch McConnell saying there will never be a commission to investigate the insurrection on January 6th. And I'm sitting here when I hear him say it, I'm going, who's this turtle to say that
Right.
that there won't be? He's in the minority. Even if it's by one vote, he's in the minority. But you've got an archaic system that's not even in the Constitution, by the way. It's Senate tradition.
Yep.
The filibuster's allowed to exist, and it's gone for too long. And you've got these states that we've talked about before, states like Wyoming, states like North Dakota, states like Montana, Idaho, that represent so few people compared to states like New York and California and Texas even. And it's while the Senate was intended to be the upper chamber and to give representation equally to the states, it ain't it ain't working.
Yeah, it's
And-
broken.
And you're not seeing, I mean, if they won't cooperate on a commission to investigate a terrorist seditionist act like the insurrection on January 6th, they're not going to vote for, I mean, Joe Manchin's got to be crazy if he thinks they're going to negotiate. They're already not negotiating in good faith. Biden's dropped his ask from 2 trillion to 1 trillion, cut his offer in half on the infrastructure bill, and they're still not playing ball on it.
Right, and he's also caved on how they're going to pay for it. So
yeah, and so
not going to raise taxes.
And so, I mean, you should have learned the lesson from the Obama years. And I love Barack Obama, but they negotiated for almost a year on health care and took all kinds of changes to that, took the public option out because Republicans said, you can't have that in there. And then the Republicans turn around and vote against it anyway.
Yep.
So
what they're going to do with everything that comes up, because they do not want Biden to get a win. They know he's already got a win already, and they don't want to see him get any more wins. Mitch McConnell has the same philosophy about Joe Biden that he had with Barack Obama. He wants to see him be a one-term president. And he's not shy about telling people that. And to me, that's just, I mean, nobody said, none of the Democrats said we want to make Donald Trump a one-term president, even though they were all thinking it. They at least had the sportsmanship not to say it out loud.
They were begging the guy to put an infrastructure bill before Congress. They were every week they would say it's infrastructure week. It's infrastructure week. Never presented a plan.
And if he had he might have gotten reelected.
There's lots of things. I mean, COVID was a terrible thing for the country and the world, but it was a chance for him to step up and lead,
which he didn't.
And if he would have
everybody was a hoax.
Yeah. If he would have been an actual leader during COVID, it would have been hard for people. If things had been going better and the vaccine had been on its way and he'd been promoting it and things like that and talking about promoted masks earlier on, it would have been hard for people to say, let's make a change.
Yeah. Be like a wartime president.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So we'll see how things work out. My concern is at the state level as much as it is at the federal level.
Right.
But you can't have, I mean, we have one party that's for free and fair government, which is the Democratic Party. And we have another party, the Republican Party, which is full on for autocracy. That's their whole thing now. And Liz Cheney can say all she wants about, she wants to change the party from the inside and all this. I'm just going like, with who?
Right.
Her and Adam Kinzinger are not going to be enough to change these people. They're going to the only way they're going to be changed is if they get drubbed out of office, and it's such a bloodbath that their party has to rebuild from scratch. And the way they're reworking these election laws, I think it's going to be tough for Democrats to win.
Well, what the Democrats need is a win like Newt Gingrich had in the 1980s. So he needs to come out, we need to come out with a plan, basically to just sweep and leave no doubt that Republicans that their plans aren't working. Well, they don't have any.
They don't have any plans. They're not a governing party.
Right. I mean, basically they run on abortion, and that's about it. They can't run on fiscal responsibility anymore because of what they let Trump get away with. So, I mean, they can, and they probably will try, but any decent opponent's going to bring up what they let Trump get by with. So,
yeah.
I mean, look who they're running as candidates. They're running, sex offenders and, serial philanderers and, just basically the dregs of the party. So,
Yeah, well, it's the total do as I say, not as I do party.
yep. And, I know you and I've talked before, and the saying has often come up, sometimes the American people deserve what they get. And, you look at some of these states where these sham candidates are running, and you're just like, really, that's the best you can do? I mean, come on.
Well, I mean, look at some of the winners we got this last time with Lauren Boebert from your great state, with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I mean, I didn't think anybody would out crazy Lauren Boebert, but Marjorie Taylor Greene has won that.
Yes, going away.
Nobody even talks about Boebert anymore. It's probably the best thing for Boebert.
Yeah, it probably is. So, yeah, I don't know if somebody got to her and said, "Hey, you need to tone it down," or what. But I think what she's in fear of is that the redistricting commission. So Colorado now has a redistricting commission. It's no longer done by the legislature, and I think she's worried that her district is going to get split up, and she's going to end up in the Democratic part, and she's going to have a tough time winning. I think that's what she's worried about. Which could happen.
I think there's enough common sense people in Colorado. She's probably going to have a tough time no matter what.
Right. Yeah. Because in 2022, we get another seat.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see how that ends up going. But yeah, I'm with you. I think democracy is kind of hanging on by a thread here. And I mean, it's lasted here longer than it ever has in history. And, they called it the grand experiment. And, people just seem to be, I mean, it just amazes me the laissez-faire attitude that people have about seeing it go away.
Well, I don't think they understand completely what it means. And I've traveled in some, and I know you have too, but I've traveled in some countries where there is, for all intents and purposes, a military dictatorship, and you end up with a police force and an army force that does whatever it wants to do.
Yep.
And you end up getting stopped at checkpoints, and you have to pay bribes, and you have to give things, they take stuff out of your luggage. And it's going to be an interesting couple of years, because there's still about 30% of the population that's been completely bamboozled. And it's a shame. It's a shame to watch it happen, because the last election was really too close. It should have been a much bigger repudiation, but people don't think it's going to affect them. They don't. And again, nobody. The argument used to be, you bring up Germany, and oh my gosh, you lost the argument because you're talking about Germany.
Right.
But you just look at all the different sayings that came out of Germany. How the famous one where they say, first they came for the Jew, and I wasn't Jewish, so I wasn't concerned.
Yep.
And then they came for the gypsy, and I wasn't a gypsy, so I wasn't concerned. And then they came for the homosexual, and I wasn't homosexual, I wasn't concerned. And on down the line, and finally they came for me, and there was no one to stand for me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is when in a democracy, if everyone's not free, then none of us are free.
Yeah.
So it's a shame to watch it melt down like this in front of us, but we're gonna have to have some people stand up, and we'll see. It used to be when stuff like this happened, you would say it's on the Republicans to get their house in order. That ship has sailed.
Right. Well,
they're not going to get their house in order.
But Liz Cheney was trying to get their house in order.
She's one person. She lost.
Right. Well, she didn't lose. She was ousted in a coup.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. In the fight, she lost.
Yeah. I mean, she was bringing up the fact that the numbers don't bear out this fealty to Donald Trump. I mean, he's not very popular. People have moved on. This sense of normalcy has returned, and people are grateful. They may not say it out loud, but and here's the other thing. So right after the election, a lot of people came up to me and they were like, "Oh my God, man, my 401k was doing so great under Trump. It's going to go into the tank." Well, guess what? The stock market's doing better than it ever has. So you don't have that argument, right? And so people are grateful for what Biden's doing, that he's, the unemployment numbers are the lowest they've been in like 5 years. I mean, the economy is back humming along. And listen, there's a reason why Trump shut down his blog. If this guy had any kind of following, his website would have gotten numbers. People would have been tuning in. I mean, Steve Bannon has a blog, for Christ's sake, and it gets pretty decent numbers. He's keeping it up. But so few people looked at Trump's blog that he finally just shut it down. I mean, what does that tell you?
I thought he didn't know how to use WordPress.
He's got enough money left. He can pay people for that. The other thing is, he might be in jail here before too long. I mean, that grand jury probe in New York, that's a serious thing. They're looking at him and Don Jr. and they've got the CFO testifying now with limited immunity. I mean, Donald Trump's got some real problems, and they don't involve running for the presidency.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying, but I'll still bring up the fact that the way they're changing these laws in a free and fair election, I agree with you. I don't think the guy has a chance, but I also don't believe that the next election, unless we can pass federal election reform, I don't think the next election is going to be free and fair.
Well, I think we will. I think it might be this fall before we pass it, because it is incumbent upon Joe Manchin to basically play for the side that he was elected for, and not the side that he's siding with most of the time. And I think he will. I think he'll eventually come to terms that the Republicans aren't playing ball, that they're just out for themselves, that there really is no negotiating with them. I mean, you can negotiate with them as long as you come down to what they're, whatever it is they're offering.
Right.
Which isn't a negotiation. It's a
their negotiation.
capitulation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Their negotiation is for you to 100% completely capitulate to them,
Yep.
which again goes back to what I was talking earlier about minority rule.
Yep. And the Democrats didn't do that. They couldn't get away with it when they were in the minority.
Yeah.
So, and so Democrats need to take a page out of Republicans' playbook. They need to play hardball with Manchin. They need to say, look, we're going to primary you, and we may lose to a Republican, but one thing's for sure, you won't be in office. So unless you start playing ball with us, guess what? We're lining people up to take your place.
Yeah, and I think they have to call his bluff on the switching parties thing too, because people say, "Oh, if they push too hard, he's going to switch parties." They need to say, "We don't care."
Yeah,
go ahead and switch parties, and you say you're for negotiating. You say you're for getting stuff done. You think giving Mitch McConnell the majority leader position is going to get stuff done? You think that's going to endear you to the Democratic Party?
Yeah, because they, in the last 8 years, they haven't gotten anything done except, McConnell passed judges during Trump's reign. What else did they do?
Nothing.
They didn't do anything.
The tax cut, the big tax cut.
Yeah, but that didn't help us. That just helped big. You know what that did? That helped companies like FedEx buy out their employees' contracts and ship their jobs to India. That's what that did.
And it also helped them do stock buybacks. And people say, "Well, what's so wrong with that?" Well, what's so wrong with that is the fact that these CEOs who are already making 350 times what their average employee makes, they get paid most of the time in stock.
Yep.
And so when they buy back the stock, it drives up the stock value, puts more money in their pockets. That's all it did.
Yep.
So, all right, let's wrap up on. Let's talk about your buddy at the Postal Service real quick, and then I've got a surprise topic for you at the end.
Yeah. So Louis DeJoy, I ran into a postal employee at my place of business the other day, and we were shooting the breeze, and I happened to ask him what he thought of Mr. DeJoy, and he said, well, around the shop, we call him Mr. Delay, because all he does is delay everything. He's just created a big mess. This guy said, I've got 18 months to go. I'm counting the days to my retirement. So, he's done everything to just make the Postal Service inadequate and irrelevant.
Isn't that just the Republican playbook every time though? They
Yeah.
they cut government spending, they starve programs where like programs like the VA that don't get the funding they need. Then they turn around and they go, well, this program doesn't work very good.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with the Postal Service. I mean, the way they took out the equipment last fall to slow down the mail processes, the way I thought I heard him, and maybe I was dreaming or having a nightmare, but I thought I heard him say something the other day in one of his testimony that he thinks for the Postal Service to survive, they're probably going to need to almost double the first class stamp price.
Well, they just went up on it to 58 cents from 55. But you know, the Democrats were able to reverse that sham of a policy the Republicans put through, where most people don't realize this because they hear the term the Postal Service is broke. It lost $7 billion last year, which is true. On paper, it did. But the reason it did is because Republicans passed a law that says the Postal Service has to fund the retirement for not only every employee, and this is fully funded. So not only every employee that they currently have on the payroll, but they have to, every year, they have to envision out 50 years. And they have to figure out how many employees they're going to have 50 years from now. And 50 years from now, who knows what the Postal Service will be like? I mean, you know, we may not even be sending letters anymore. Everything may be electronic. Who knows? But they have to envision out 50 years and figure out how many employees they're going to have and fund the retirement for those people as well. So people they haven't even hired, may not ever hire, they got to put money in the bank for their retirement. And, you know, it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. And so we did get that reverse. So, well, the good news is that Biden's, I think he's had 3 appointments that have been approved to the Postal Board, the Board of Governors.
Right. I haven't seen that they got approved. So if they did,
I was pretty sure they did. At least 2 of them did. And all 3 are really strong advocates for postal workers. And I believe that's going to give them the votes to make a change at the top.
Well, let's certainly hope so, because
And,
I'm not saying the Postal Service doesn't need to change, but it doesn't need to change. I mean, the Republicans are, you know, Trump and DeJoy, they're trying to eliminate it. That's been their goal for the last 30 years. They want to privatize it. They want FedEx and UPS to take over.
Well, I think I'm with you. I think it needs to change, but I think it needs to add more services. I think it needs to be a federal credit union where people can use it as a bank. I think the postal services would have been think if we deployed the postal services as vaccine centers.
Yeah.
Right. You could go into a post office and get a vaccine.
Yeah.
If they'd use space for that. I mean, I think there's all kinds of ways we could apply and use it almost as a social service center to allow people lots of different opportunities. And so I think there's tons of ways we could use it. I mean, you think about the logistics that the post office does. If I send you a letter, the fact that it actually, well, it technically should before DeJoy, actually it will get there in a couple days, right? From Oklahoma to Colorado, if all things are working. Well, if that kind of logistics is in place, there's ways we could have distributed vaccines. There's ways we could have distributed masks to people.
Yeah, I mean, you think about ways the federal government can do stuff. So, for instance, there are tons of doctors and nurses in the military, right? How about deploying those? You know, nurses can give shots. I mean, if a pharmacist can give me my COVID shot, a military nurse certainly could.
Absolutely.
And there's plenty of those. So you could have put 1 or 2 of those for every shift at every post office. Maybe not every post office, but enough so that people.
No, you could have. Yeah, you could. And just think about it. For the people that were shut in, if you stick a nurse on a postal truck that comes to the neighborhood, somebody could walk out to the curb and get a shot in the arm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, I mean, I think that we have a tendency now, and as Americans, which is going to sound really funny when I say this, but we have a tendency to think too small.
Yeah.
Like we we say this stuff all the time. We're the greatest country ever, and we're all for the red, white, and blue, and
Right.
the eagle's soaring, and all this stuff. And it's like, but let's put it into action. Let's use it to actually help people.
Yep.
All right. Well, hopefully Mr. Joy is gone soon. As we wrap up, the last thing I wanted to talk about was just this week was the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Yeah. And that's what it was. I mean, I grew up in Oklahoma. I can tell you, I took 9th grade mandated Oklahoma history. Every student in Oklahoma is required to take Oklahoma history. And not a word was taught about the race massacre in that class. When I was in school, you go back and study the history of it. When the Tulsa papers were microfished, they went through and cut out any article about the race massacre that told the whole truth. The original headline in the Tulsa Tribune read, 2 whites killed in race riot caused by blacks.
Wow.
And it didn't talk about how over 300 people were massacred, how thousands of people lost their homes, how businesses were looted and burned, how it was the first time in the history that I know of that the federal government through the National Guard used planes to drop bombs on U.S. citizens.
Right.
And it was just a terrible day in our history. And Tulsa's not the only place this happened. It happened all across the South. And but it was a terrible day in our history and should be remembered. And we need to have an honest conversation as a country about reparations.
Yeah.
And I know people say, well, why should, the right wing talking point is we don't want to teach critical race theory because we don't want to make, white kids feel bad. And why should people today pay for things that they didn't do? But they're missing the whole point from the standpoint that if you're white in this country, you live through privilege.
Yeah.
And there's things that people benefited from. That land was taken in many cases, and families grew up on that land after it was taken, and they benefited from that. And the wealth was taken out of that community, taken away from those people. And so people today are still benefiting from that massacre and how it hurt people. And so something has to be done about that across our country.
Yeah. Well, and you would think that we were moving in a direction towards that, but then you see what Republicans are doing in the state legislatures, and you're like, nope. And the thing is, I don't think people realize this, but this argument's been going on since the 1740s. You look at our Constitution, it refers to black people as, 3/4 of a person. It's just, ever since our country's founding, they've been getting shortchanged. The founding fathers could have eliminated slavery. They could have said, if you're going to be part of this union, you got to do away with your slaves, but they didn't do it. And so, 100 years later, we had the Civil War, and then 100 years later, we're still fighting it on a lot of fronts. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very despicable, especially for people that want to say we're a quote unquote Christian nation, which we could debate that on a whole other show. But you don't get to claim to be a Christian nation and then treat people like this.
Right.
Can't do both.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, hey everybody, it's been a pleasure visiting with the G-Man, and I hope everybody enjoyed the podcast. Drop us a line, shoot us a question, send us a topic idea. We'd love to hear from you. Everybody be safe out there. I know more things are opening up and we're getting closer to vaccine. If you haven't gotten the vaccine yet, please get it. It's the quickest way that we can get back to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah, there's lots of choices out there too now with Johnson & Johnson and Moderna and Pfizer. So you get a single shot or double dose.
Absolutely. All right, man. Take care.
Good to see you.
All right, everybody.
Bye, everybody.